You're right, no rush, no rush. All right, team, we're back into it. We've still got a bit to go through the agenda, but as I said earlier, I don't want to rush through and then people feel like they haven't had the opportunity to go over stuff. So I'm going to hand it back over to staff now. We'll move on to the next activity, I think is economic development. Community facilities and support, pages 71 to 77.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Time to take a look at the community support side of community facilities and support. And as you can see on the slides in front of you, you are starting to see the impact of COVID-19 and the lockdown in particular in relation to our activities for the last quarter of the financial year. Prior to lockdown, we did manage to continue with work that's part of our social investment approach that is about building the capability of the social and community sector within Kapiti. So we were able to run some of our, or help to co-host funding clinics with key community funders and the council. We had a well-attended clinic in Otaki, and we had to cancel the second clinic due to COVID-19. The Community Gardens program, which is a very popular and active program in the March-April part of the year, again, was heavily affected by COVID. We had to cancel engagement workshops that we were doing with Grey Power around around the age-friendly strategy. Zeal, thankfully, was able to continue with some of their programs by taking them digital and online during lockdown. And then once lockdown ended, we were able to get started with our 2020 Number 8 Wire Week event. I was actually quite surprised that we were able to land that, and I just want to acknowledge the hard work of the Connected Communities team in particular in being able to gear up so quickly to ensure that that program could continue, not quite entirely as planned, but still deliver some really great events. And I think there's a photo of one of those events that you could take a look at. So I am reliably informed that that is compost, and it was a compost-related Number 8 Wire Week event. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have in relation to that part of the activity report.
I don't see any coming up on the screen. I have one just in regards to the earthquake-prone assessment stuff. There's been murmurings from central government around reviewing that. Do we know what the nature of that is, around whether they're looking at making major changes to their current position?
Gladly hand back to my colleague.
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, look, I was just looking to see if Natasha was here. I'm not aware, and possibly because I've been focused on COVID, but I'm not aware of those changes.
Okay.
And actually talked to Crispin about the portfolio yesterday, and he's still working to 2033, I think, is the and of course much sooner, but so I can come back.
Look, I could be wrong, and actually I could even be referring to the opposition party as well. I remember seeing something around a review of the earthquake-prone
we'll
stuff.
have a look, and I'll talk with Natasha and the building team, and if there is any pending change that is an impact, or maybe an impact, we can bring that to you just in an email and update and go from there.
Thanks, James. No rush. And so I think Angela, Councillor Buswell, you had a question there. Sorry, Janice.
Janice, I just had a quick question about the Number 8 program. I'm always interested to compare the figures from last year in terms of attendance, and because I think from memory this year's program was quite different to previous years in the offering. So I'm just wondering whether how that looked.
So we haven't done that analysis of the turnout for this year yet. It's one of the pieces of work that probably is a little slower given the other COVID-related activities that team is having to deal with at the moment. But we will bring that back. I think 400 people turning out for the first event this year was a positive start, but as I say, we'll bring those figures back. The event did look a little bit different this year. I think anecdotally, I think what I've been told is that the attendance was a little lower for some of those events. So that's, I think, why the analysis is taking a little bit longer than what it normally would. They're trying to delve into that in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Janice. Next up, we do now have economic development on page 78.
I'm back.
And Mr. Jackson.
In fact, actually, the first slide is really that town centre stuff that Mark alluded to earlier. Or the chief executive's got a funny fit. But just knowing the slide come up, Sean's left the room. So if you want to flick on to the next slide. This is in your pack. You'll have the quarterly report and update from Elevate Aotaki, and possibly the chair is better placed to talk to any questions on that. My understanding is things are going well, and the ED team just provide some support to the team up in Aotaki. Next slide,
Any questions?
Chris.
Next one.
And then into the ED team, as you'll appreciate, as you've heard continually, Darren in particular has been working really hard on that response and recovery and helping businesses stand up. But some of the cool things that have happened along the way has obviously been the filming of that feature film, and I think it's just about finished, is my understanding, and there is work happening in the background to have its debut here in Kapiti. And then there was the pop-up business school that we saw. I saw the last day of in Coastlands, and I think there was 50 odd people, businesses attended that. And Darren's given some interesting stats in the report and the appendix. And I just want to touch on some of those because the numbers are pretty staggering in terms of the reach. Forgive me, because my page numbers are different, but there is a table on the right-hand side, thanks, 84, thanks, Martin. Nearly 50,000 people reached with some of the programs and information they're putting up. 215 local businesses showcased online, and the Love Local with 2,300 people. So they're reaching out as much as they can in collaboration, obviously, with elected members who've got those portfolios. The last bit that isn't on the slide there is the 5 major events that took place in this reporting period. And of course, there was the impact for some of them, but that work continues. And I want to offer an apology from Darren, both for this morning's session and this afternoon's briefing. Darren is in the middle of looking at the latest applications for major events funds. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Buswell.
It's not really a question, it's more of a comment just around the work that the ED team have been doing. It has been amazing to see them do what they have been doing under the COVID situation, that's for sure. There was one point that I really just wanted to talk about, and it's totally slipped my mind. Oh, the pop-up business school. The pop-up business school was incredible this year, and I think it was actually due to COVID. So it was an absolutely positive, amazing atmosphere to be involved with, to be honest. There was, as you say, there were 50 businesses there, people that were, many of them had fallen on hard times. Many of them have been made unemployed over the period of COVID, and while sitting in lockdown, they thought, bugger it, I'm going to do it myself. So it was perfect timing, absolutely perfect for them to be inspired to get up and do something different for themselves. And then there were other businesses there that are now looking at employing people because they have more confidence in what they're offering and so forth. So definitely a positive thing for the Kapiti Coast.
I caught the last day when they were in Coastlands and the energy, and their pictures, and it was just a pleasure and a shame not to have been a wider part of it. But thank you, I appreciate that, and I'll pass that on.
I think that your time is up.
Thanks, Catherine.
Oh, Councillor Halliday, sorry, I looked at the screen before you went down.
Oh, look, it's nothing major. It's actually another statement again. I just want to give a little plug to Startup Weekend, which is going to be in next month as well, which sort of dovetails a bit into the pop-up. And they've just started doing their online marketing as well. It's a very fun weekend. We spend 50 hours basically putting a business together from scratch. So, yeah, just wanted to make mention of that.
Thanks, Martin. I'm just going to invite Sean up. I'm sure he's coming up for infrastructure. Keeping the staff fit today. Backs and forwards.
Rightio, good morning again. So access to transport, tidying up and finishing off the year's capital works, basically chip sealing project, number of footpaths there that we've completed, so this is the additional funding that we have from NZTA and contributing towards that work. Revocation, you'll see down at the southern end of the old highway works starting there. Higgins doing that work for through NZTA, but delivering on the revocation itself. They will be progressing through that zone up towards Ramity Road. I think the next stage of the project is at the roundabout that's proposed there, potentially before Christmas, but the way they're going at the moment, that might be next Christmas, but it's quite slow going. Christmas. They had some issues down there with some services and other stuff, and COVID obviously slowed things down a bit in terms of getting started, but hopefully once they get moving, they'll start to ramp things up again and really start to get that moving. Some other bits and pieces of capital works there, and then a bit of an upgrade on the old state highway. Trying to get cyclists across and avoid the rail overbridge at the Moa Street, to move them across so that they can use Hinamoa Street to bypass that and link up with the cycle lanes that were provided through revocation on the north side of there. So come out by Boat City basically and rejoin the highway through there. Next. So that access and transport, any questions? Coastal, so again, closing out the year's capital works program. Some of that stuff slowed down obviously through level 4, but then ramped up again. The work down at the waterfront, obviously looking at getting that completed. Wharamuku block wall, that work was finished. The ongoing work, which we will likely discuss through the LTP process, is the condition and replacement of the Raumati seawall. So it's about 4.5 kilometres or 3 kilometres long there. That was a joint project funded by central government and local residents, and whether or not there's a requirement for council to be involved in the replacement of that and what that might look like in terms of costs and everything else is a piece of work that we're looking at the moment. Paikakariki seawall, so the parade seawall is the project that we put in through for CIP funding. We haven't heard back on any of the projects that we put forward through that process, and in that most of that stuff has already been announced. And sort of time's running out in terms of getting decisions made. We're not potentially or overly hopeful that we would find out that we're going to get some money for that or the other projects we put through into that funding round. So that would mean then we're back to the current program, which is, I think there's about $150,000 this year to look at the tender, but the physical work's not starting until next financial year, and then moving on for 2 years, the construction program. And Old Coach Route, there again is another piece of work that we would need to bring back to you for a briefing, and the implications of that strip of old access road that sits on the foreshore and the beach, running south from sort of Raumati, and its current status, whether it's seabed foreshore or who owns it, has some implications for council in terms of upgrading assets in that space. It has been the subject of a lot of, there's certainly a paper that came to council back in 2003-4 looking at an option to purchase it, and we've done more work since then, obviously looking at options, but again, that'll be something that we talk to you about through the long-term plan process. I think that's it for coastal.
Sorry, Mr. Burns.
Yeah, the 3 kilometre wall at Raumati, I see the findings have found the council responsible for that. How were those findings made, or what was the process behind the findings?
Yeah, So I don't think that's 100% in terms of outright responsibility. I guess there needs to be a conversation about the level of responsibility that applies to renewals, and there may be issues there around what constitutes renewal replacement as opposed to, I guess, more robust maintenance costs and that as a potential option. But again, we will need to have a separate briefing and talk through all of that. There are some liability issues there that would be best to talk to at a briefing.
Sorry, just in terms of the findings, was that done internally, that process of finding the obligations, or was it more of an external sort of process?
So we've had some external advice to get to that position, but again, there needs to be a conversation with council as to how we treat that moving forward with what we might end up looking at in that space.
Thanks, Sean. I got Councillor Holbrook.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. The Paikakariki seawall, I was under the impression that we were going to actually procure that contract before the long-term plan rather than just have the consents. Is that going to happen in the next? It's just not mentioned there, it's just consents that are granted.
Yeah, that may be. My understanding is that we would procure the tender this financial year. So, like I said, I'm pretty sure there's about $168,000 in the current year for that tender process. So I double check the accuracy of that comment, but that certainly was my understanding.
Thank you. If you could confirm that, that would be good. It's just not reflected in that bullet point.
Thanks, Sean. I'll get you to move on to solid waste.
So there's a couple of things there. The recycling bins down at McLean Park with the lovely photograph. And some events that we were involved in, and some other, I guess, some operational audit work that's been carried out. So again, those are sort of business as usual, zero waste education program, some talks that Ninka's team have organised through some community groups there in Salvation Army. Very well received in terms of that. So with the stormwater work, obviously the $250 million worth of upgrades that we have programmed in that space, continuing that work. We are, I guess as the comments reflect there, as you know, we see further effects of climate change, the frequency of some of those flooding events is likely to increase, although touch wood, we haven't had a significant event in the last year. It's certainly more frequent, smaller events that create more, I guess, minor issues, but certainly create a bit of extra work in that space. We're actually looking at updating our, so the bit of work at the moment to update the stormwater model for the district. And that work was commissioned, and I think it's in the contracts paper to get that work started, and that's a 2-year program of work to update the stormwater network model across the district to reflect the newer assumptions around climate change, but also reflect some of the good work that we've already done to upgrade some of the network. Any questions?
Just checking, there's none coming up on the screen, so you just plough on ahead, Sean.
So again, a couple of the survey work relates to the capital improvement work. So there's been you may have seen we've been surveying the district for, I think, at least the last year, if not a bit longer, determining where everybody's stormwater connects to help better inform both our network modelling and response in terms of flooding. We have a number of issues where private property stormwater discharges across onto another property causing problems. So this work is looking to try and quantify the extent of that and will be used to update the stormwater strategy. And I think there's a bylaw proposed as part of the policy work program that this work would feed into.
His Worship the Mayor.
I think it's page 104, looking at key issues and risk. You mentioned that the sea level rise and elevated groundwater levels. The hydraulic neutrality is becoming less effective. And that means any new solutions will be costly. Are these extra costs to be borne by the developer?
Potentially. The other aspect of that we're looking at the moment is related to the network modelling that we talked about, and having a look from a strategic point of view whether some of the larger scale projects that we are looking at in terms of that $250 million work program provide greater certainty around benefits to larger catchment areas that could then be used to look at how effective, I guess, hydraulic neutrality would be in conjunction with maybe investing in something much larger at the downstream end of a particular catchment that would achieve the same outcome as the upstream storage. So that's a piece of work that we're looking at the moment. So obviously as rainfall intensities increase and we have more of these events, that requires more storage, and 1 in 100 year return period events become more frequent, and you're required to restore more volume on site. Again, that adds cost and makes it quite restrictive in terms of what available land you might have left in terms of development. So it's making sure that if there's a balance there between, like I said, improved larger downstream works, that we could look at what that might mean in terms of the catchments upstream. So all of the work that we did over the last 2 years, looking at those, prioritising those projects, gives us a much better handle now on the extent of the problems within an entire catchment, that we could then look at it holistically rather than maybe looking at individual projects as they come up.
Problem in terms of when you use hydraulic neutrality, it's easy to tag the development cost to the developer. Whereas if you're looking at a wider catchment-based approach, how do you relate that level of benefit that the developer gets to the cost? How do you distribute that cost? What sort of methodology do you have to do that?
So that's where the network modelling allows you to then see what's the percentage of volume contributed by that particular area of open space. What does that mean in terms of capacity? What does that mean in terms of cost then for your downstream upgrade? So if you need to go up a pipe size, or you need to provide an extra pump to deal with that, then it's quite easy to convert that back to dollars and then have a conversation maybe about developer contributions and that relative share associated with that work.
Would be.
Yes.
No other questions, Sean, so just box on.
So wastewater treatment plant, again we've done some work there renewing the blowers that oxygenate the wastewater at the treatment plant as it comes into the plant, which even though we have some money in out years for a major upgrade there, that makes the plant a bit more efficient leading up to that work at I guess a reasonably small cost in terms of capital. COVID-19 again, there are and likely to be more issues, and this will be something we talk about as part of maybe the briefing this afternoon, or maybe a wider conversation with the government's release of funding for the Three Waters reform, some $700 million worth of funding. on top of already an area where there is limited resource for contractors to deliver that type of work, and councils, as we have a large capital budget already targeting that type of work. Certainly we believe it's going to be harder to procure resources to deliver some of those projects, and strategically how we look to do that over the next 12 months is something that we would need to probably talk about as part of that ongoing discussion around the Three Waters area and capital improvements, and the work we've got programmed at the moment for the water treatment plant. So this is wastewater, but it's right across that sector in terms of pipe laying, but also civil and mechanical, electrical. So again, some additional work there is really a ongoing sort of business as usual, making sure that the capacity of all of our plants are where they need to be, and strategically that work feeds into the asset management planning update work, which is again linked to the LTP. And a bit more work there in terms of Otaki. A number of years ago we removed some sludge from one of the ponds up there. Some further monitoring we're doing would suggest we might need to have another look at that in the future, and that would potentially come at a reasonable cost in terms of removing that material. If last time we did that we had issues transporting it through to Silverstream just because of the nature of the material, so really that's just I guess an early warning that we may have to look at that again in the next couple of years. So Waikanae Water Treatment Plant, I mentioned the detailed design work is happening there. That was one of the projects we put through in terms of the CIP funding. We've had to increase the scope of that work as we've done some more condition assessment work on the site. I don't know, we drained the clarifier and did some 3D modelling and some closer CCTV inspection there, and the rapid mix section that links to the clarifier, we need to now look at upgrading that as well. And there's just some other bits and pieces there. HAZOPS, the chlorine room in terms of fire protection, we need to look at that, and we're also looking at how do we manage that in terms of funding and costs, and again that's probably part of the conversation around the Three Waters funding opportunity and what that might mean. Certainly for the water treatment plant, that would be, again, we put that in for CIP funding, so that would be probably at the top of the list if you were going to look at where that funding might be allocated. Moving to Otaki there, Tasman Road, there's a major water upgrade. I think it's about a 225 or a 250 main that we are getting close to completing the design for that work. We've also been doing a little bit of work up there. The Otaki and Hautiri are a part of that water safety and resilience program of work that's in the current LTP. So those two projects are the next on the list after Waikanae. Some lateral replacement ongoing. That was work really that from the water meter installation, we put together quite an extensive database on the condition of those water laterals across the district. Because we were in on at every connection basically digging up those laterals, we were able to get a good sense as to what condition they were and where areas were where we were having issues. And another bit of work there in terms of zone metering, which is part of our leak detection on the network, allows us to isolate zones into areas which are more manageable for leak detection.
I think we've got a hand over here through no further questions. I think it's Natasha. Thanks very much, Sean. Welcome back.
Hello again. Right, so we'll kick off first with district-wide planning, and the team has continued to make really good progress with both resolving the appeals and progressing the variations that we have had underway. So we've got, at this stage, we've got one outstanding set of appeals. It's been submitted to the court, and we're waiting at this point in time to see whether or not the Environment Court will seek further information relating to the consent order, which would
If the court accepts that, that would resolve it. If they do seek further information, then there are some costs which may be incurred depending on what the nature of any information is that they're after. We have got, there's one variation which we are still working on at the moment. The other two variations in this reporting period were completed and no appeals have been lodged on those variations, which is really good. So at this point in time, we are still on track for looking at the district plan being close to operative by the end of this year. It may not be till February, depending on how things go. The second point on this slide is I guess, an acknowledgement and flagging that due to central government direction and proposed amendments to legislation, there is going to be significant costs that we will face in the district planning area in future years as we're required to give effect to these changes. I'm happy to take any questions on the district planning stuff before moving on.
Thanks, Natasha. I can't see any at this stage. If you just want to move along. Okay, so moving more on to the consenting side of things. The core work of the building team continued throughout alert levels 4, 3 and 2. The only piece of work that wasn't able to be undertaken was our inspections of building sites under alert level 4, with the exception of an essential services project, and there was a self-build project. So both of those were complying with the requirements enforced under level 4. What we did find was that there was a significant immediate demand as soon as we moved to level 3 and building sites could get operational again. So the team, once they did get up and running, were extremely busy to catch up on a backlog of work there. In terms of code compliance certificates, we did end up, we had staff were functional, able to work from home by and large, and we did issue 26 code compliance certificates during that first COVID period, and once inspections could resume under level 3. There was a backlog of code compliance certificates to issue, and it was not possible because of the delays for these to be issued within statutory timeframes. As noted in the report, MB has signalled that they are entirely expecting that to be the case for many building consent authorities across the country. So it's not an unusual situation that we're in there. In the overall, in the 2019-20 year, inspections were carried out for all of the 43 premises for which an alcohol licence was granted or renewed. There were 114 special licences which were issued, and 217 managers' certificates were issued or renewed, and that compares to 116 special licences and 199 managers' certificates last year. So a little bit busier in terms of managers' certificates, but about the same with regard to special licences. Councillor Pravanov.
So on 131, the environmental health licensing and compliance section. So with the registered food businesses, I'm just wondering if they're actually visited, is it yearly, annually?
So it does depend what sort of plan and requirements are. So some of them are annual, some of them are every 18 months. Yeah, so staff look at what's required and they've got them on a rotational basis.
Thank you. So currently the registered food businesses will operate under a template food control plan with verified. What does that actually mean? So, so basically they're working to what their plan actually says? In the first instance when you go to visit them, or when you do check on this?
I can't give you a percentage off the top of my head, but I do know there are substantial follow-up visits that are often needed.
Are they?
For staff to go back and check.
Okay. And are there any businesses that aren't registered?
more than likely. It's hard. We don't know what we don't know. Yeah.
Councillor Halliday.
Something that was brought up recently was just someone looking to find the information on a application for a liquor licence. Not so much the managers or the special licences as such, but more on the lines of premises licences and the ability to view those licence applications, whether it be a new application or specifically a new application, but also renewals as well. And I appreciate that the DLA doesn't sit within a council as such, but people that do these applications do them through council, and they do come up on our EMB report. So I was just wondering, whereabouts, is there a space somewhere, and I don't know, it's not on the council side, but is there a space somewhere these can be viewed via the internet as such?
Not online for the general. Not online for the general public at this point in time, no.
So a side comment to that, it's interesting with being registered with MPI, where you can view all of the licences online for ones that are registered with MPI. So similar sort of program, but just obviously a different entity. But obviously they've got a lot more resources as well. If you can continue on, thanks, Natasha.
Sure. That was actually the end of mine. It's handing over now to Janice.
Janice, welcome back, Janice. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pravanov. I didn't have you on my screen, so just popped it up.
Yes, thank you. In response to your question, do you think it would be worthwhile, for example, if there was a link put on the KCDC website to that other information you've just identified?
Yeah, look, I'm not trying to avoid answering that in the meeting, but let's have a chat about that over lunch, because it's a little bit more complicated.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Just remind me at lunchtime.
Yep.
Sean.
So just there was a reference to the Paikokariki seawall funding. There was $161,000 this year to do the tender for that project. So that slide wasn't correct.
Thanks, Sean. Welcome back, Janice.
Thank you. I feel like we need that Eminem song playing in the background. Guess who's back? Back again. But here we go. So, governance and tangata whenua.
We'll just make sure we get the copyright if we do.
Always good to be safe on that one. On the slides in front of you, there are some actions and achievements from the quarters in question, but I actually thought it might be appropriate to start by acknowledging that that during the third and fourth quarters of this financial year, there was a significant change in the way you as councillors carried out your governance responsibilities. From your living rooms or your studies via Zoom. So it feels important to acknowledge that. But in terms of what is on the slide in front of you, you made some fairly key decisions during the quarter in relation to the Kapiti Coast Economic Development Strategy. For the first time in a number of years, you chose to exercise your right to vote in the Electra Trust elections. We managed to squeeze in one citizenship ceremony this year before things changed. And as is noted on the slide, we continue to deal with Official Information Act queries, numbers slightly down in the third and fourth quarter for obvious reasons, I think. But just noting that one request this year has breached the 20 working day limit, so that will have an impact on achieving KPIs. In terms of tangata whenua, as you can see on the slide, a significant activity within the period in question was the funding support provided to the 3 iwi of the district to support their response to COVID-19 and their recovery planning activities. Also during this period, the iwi representatives from Ngāti Toa and Ngā Hapu or Otaki were confirmed for Te Whakamininga o Kapiti. And I should just also note that within that period, the Atiawa Ki Whakarongotai Charitable Trust confirmed its withdrawal from Te Whakamininga o Kapiti. Planning for the Maramataka 2021, the Maramataka calendar, led by Ngāti Toa this year, was really active during the third and fourth quarters this year, and continuing over lockdown. And then, as is noted there, just sneaking into the start of the first quarter of the current year, the launch of that calendar took place in early July at Takapuwahia Marae in Parurua, and it was a really lovely occasion.
Thank you, Janice. I've got Mr. Burns.
Yeah, the withdrawal of Te Atiawa from the Whakamamina Alliance must be seen as a bit of a blow to pan-tribal cooperation. In terms of the withdrawal, why did they withdraw? And secondly, what's the current position there at the moment?
I might answer your questions in reverse order, if that's okay. The current position is that we continue to engage with Te Atiawa on a range of issues that relate to council business. The reasons for the withdrawal, I mean, that is potentially something best discussed with the board of the Charitable Trust themselves, but they relate largely to the Trust's view that they possibly would be better served by a more direct one-to-one partnership with the council rather than by being part of a collective partnership. In terms of what it suggests for pan-tribal relationships within this area, again, I think that's a matter best addressed by iwi, but I would note that the three iwi continue to work collaboratively through the Art Confederation, which is a long-standing and strong relationship between those three iwi.
Question. So will their withdrawal have implications in the long term for the Whakamamina Alliance or grouping?
So Te Whakaminenga o Kapiti is the partnership body that I guess it's an instrument that reflects our broader partnership with the three iwi within our district. We have acknowledged for the last 12 to 15 months in conversation with our iwi partners that there seems to be a collective view that the partnership is something that we all need to sit down and have some conversation about to understand whether or not the partnership that we have now is the partnership that we need to carry us through to the next 25 years. It's a 25-year-long partnership. So one partner having withdrawn from Te Whakaminenga is of course a reason to explore those issues, but that was an active conversation prior to Te Atiawa's withdrawal.
If I could maybe add to that, Guy, when the minutes for the last Te Whakaminenga meeting come out, that will go some way to answering some of the questions that you've had, and that was a clear message from the two that remained at the table to Te Atiawa, the willingness to continue to be involved, an open door for them to attend at any time. I think what we hear is that the current model isn't working for them. The relationship still remains, and I will signal to the whole table, and I know that Councillor Halliday and Compton were in the meeting, that it will lead into a discussion for the LTP. So if you do want to play a part in I guess meeting their expectations, there will be an opportunity through the LTP to hear, I guess, their concerns and to respond to that. So that's just a little bit from me on that, being at the table at the time. Did you have one further question? I think I saw you were just about to... No. All right, I don't see any other questions on governance and tangata whenua, so I'm just quick check. And if not, I think that was the end of the activity reports, and we go back to the recommendations, which I think are on page 49, just quickly. Just flicking back through digitally. Yeah, page 49 of the digital agenda team. We've got the recommendations there. Just bear with me as I'm scrolling through. That's right. And we've got someone that wants to move those recommendations, which is recommendation 44 and 45. Councillor Pravanov. Someone second? Councillor Holbrook. Any further discussion? Just open that up for debate. Don't see any. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. It's carried. Councillor Halliday. She's not here, and I'll cover that with you over the break, just in terms of what's happened there. But thanks for raising it, Martin. So look, team, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, and that is through here, the quarterly, the Treasury Management Policy Review, found on page 140. Just handing over to you, Mark. Thought so?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So, just in the interest of time, take the report as read. Before you for consideration today is some very minor changes to our Treasury Management Policy. Largely, the changes do reflect what we've actually spoken about a little bit earlier today. The changes, or the alternate net debt to operating revenue covenants from the LGFA. So essentially, it means I guess we're just aligning our policy to the LGFA covenants. We're still obviously maintaining our financial strategy, but it does give us the ability to go up if we needed to. So as you'll see, it provides that ratio increases to 300% for the current financial year, for next financial year as well, and then it reduces year on year by 5%, so that as at 1st of July 2025, it is then reduced, it stays static at 280%. So that's net debt to total operating revenue is 280%. You'll recall earlier from our quarterly finance update, we're currently sitting at 185%. So it was necessary to update the policy. You'll also know the appendix to the report has got the track changes, so you can see everything we've changed. Apart from the debt covenants, we've also made some very minor changes to correct the name of this committee. It is the Strategy and Operations Committee. There's a further change which is just really correcting the formula that we use to calculate liquidity. So it's your debt plus your committed facilities plus cash on hand over your debt. So we've changed that. There's two changes there. And then in terms of the counterparty limits, there's some strikeouts of what we have simplified. The last time the policy was put up, we did actually simplify the counterparty credit limits. A previous version's policy had a kind of a weighted formula that then you applied against your limits. So that just needs to be taken off, given we have simplified the way in which we measure our counterparty credit limits. So through you, Mr. Chair, the changes are very minor. They reflect the LGFA's changes, and I'm happy to take the report as read and go straight to questions.
Thank you, Mark. And if I could just remind elected members, as Mark has said, we have discussed this. This is relating to the discussion earlier around the LGFA, and this is simply just following through on that we've previously decided to support. So, Mr. Burns, and then Councillor Compton.
Yes, I just refer to page 6 of the policy, which is page 148 of the report, number 15. Bullet point 4, it says to invest in the Kapiti Resilience Fund and the Kapiti Growth Fund. If I remember, recollect correctly, the policy to borrow money to invest in the financial market has been abandoned by Council. So I'm just questioning why those bullet points are still there if that scheme is not going ahead.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so the short answer to that is we don't have a resilience fund and we don't have a growth fund, so we're not active in that space. We have, in the interest of time, we have simply just been through our policy and made the minor amendments. We didn't feel the need to that we needed to take that out. We're not active in that space, but it does provide the ability to do so in the future. So the changes before you today are simply just really making minor corrections to committee name and the covenants. But I'd just like to re-stress we're not active in those two funds at all.
So wouldn't it be easier to delete them out? Delete that reference?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I see the Chief Executive. Through you, Mr. Chair, look, we don't feel the need that you need to delete them out. In terms of the Resilience Fund, we do have a self-insurance reserve that we touched on earlier today. So in terms of our OPEX, we rate fund $150,000 a year. It either gets used if we have a loss event or it doesn't. If it doesn't, it goes into a special fund which is sitting within equity, and that part of the policy does mean that we have to comply with that, so we apply interest to that, which is shown in the annual report. So no, the officer recommendation is we don't change it.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Mine's on a similar vein to that. I guess because this has been in the policy since June of 2018, hasn't it? So I guess any decision to actually actively use those two fund mechanisms, that would come back through council rather than just happening behind the scenes, I guess. So there is that. I'm just seeking reassurance that there is that check on it happening.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. Cool. Thank you.
All right, team, I don't see any further questions. I'm just having a quick cast around again. So if there are no further questions, we've just got the recommendations. And sorry, I think I've got to scroll up, not down.
I'm sorry, I could show you recommendations. 42.
Yeah, got that now. Thanks, Wayne. Recommendation 15 on page 142. Have I got someone that's happy to move that? His Worship the Mayor and Councillor Buswell seconded. Any further discussion? Don't see any. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. Carried. Thank you, Mark. And moving on to item number 8.5, which is the Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting. And every year we have the remits that are discussed. Thank you, Jill. And just, we've got Maureen coming up to the table. Yeah. Well, I think you'll need to. And just before I get Maureen to introduce the report and just walk us through this, because I think this is the first lot of remits for this term, this council. I'm just trying to think. Yes. We can go through the remits one by one and vote on them individually, and that could be painful. I can see Gwyn giving us the thumbs up there. Or we could take them as a block. So I'm happy to have that discussion once Maureen's gone through the report, and she's going to take that as read. So I think she's going to hand it straight back to me.
Kia ora koutou. So as the Chair just said, tomorrow is the LGNZ AGM, and they will be voting on remits as well as two other items there in terms of a proposed change of rule and the election of the President and Vice President. There are 11 remits that are going to be going up for voting tomorrow, and the paper from Council officers recommends that support is for all 11. If I can take the paper as read, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I do have a couple myself, so I'm just going to open it up for questions. Councillor Compton?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of voting on one by one, I guess my only objection was to remit 6, which was around the electoral cycle, but that's just a theoretical academic debate on it. I mean, it forms part of the overall discussions that government would have on electoral terms and that. I guess, is your view that the government, I mean, assuming this got passed by LGNZ and got put to government saying you should do this, that would your view be that government would likely consider that if they were to look at the overall central government electoral system and local government one?
I obviously can't be 100% sure, but I think it would be unusual if they didn't.
Yeah.
They'd need to take into consideration what impact it would have for the community as a whole. Yeah.
Or you could take the one by exception.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Compton. I'll see whether everyone else has the same feeling when we get to it. Councillor Randall?
Yeah, thank you. Through you to Morag. If we pass these resolutions, right, and support the various remits, at the end of the day, does the Mayor have a discretion, because he'll be obviously be the person voting for them on our behalf, I presume, does he have a discretion to follow, after listening to the conversation, can he change his mind?
No. Can you do that now? Because the live streaming can get.
No.
Thank you. And as Chief Executive just said, unless we want to give him that option. So I have a couple of... Brenny, I just want to check you. No further questions? No. Thank you. So I had a couple... Councillor Holborough, and then I'll come back.
Yes, I just wanted to go back to the electoral cycle one, and I've got another question as well. With that, I'm just concerned that a 4-year cycle would not fit in with the annual planning process. Would there need to be considerations around that as well? Because at the moment it all happens, at various times during the triennium, which suits when councillors are up to speed, and it allows 2 years of the annual plan to happen before the election happens. Would you then have to consider the long-term plan processes as well? Does the paper address that?
It doesn't go into a lot of detail about that, but it does talk about considering alongside the impacts of it. So if this was to go through, LGNZ would, I believe, need to consider the impact of changing from a 3 to a 4-year cycle when they're in discussions with central government.
I think it's a waste of time. I don't think it's going to happen unless central government changes their electoral cycle. And I think it's just hiding to nothing, really, this remit. So I would like to exclude this remit from the... I mean, I know that's in debate, but can we just be a bit flexible about that? Seeing as somebody else doesn't want it either, maybe... Would anybody...
Look, well, I think we won't take that now. We'll just see whether we've got any further questions, and then we can come back to that at the end.
Question. So when it says under iwi considerations they supported 3 of the remits, does that mean they don't support the others, or they particularly support those ones?
So Ngāti Toa provided specific feedback about those 4, and those were the only ones that they provided feedback on. So it wasn't, I wouldn't take that as that they did not support the others, but they specifically wanted to provide feedback on those 4.
And do we have a question about the exclusion of macrons issue that they raised?
So the remit itself doesn't talk about excluding macrons, because at the moment there is no issue with councils not using macrons. The issue that's raised through the remit is that it's a difficult process for councils to be able to use macrons without just using it as a trading name. So the response back to Ngāti Toa was that within this, at the moment, there is no issue to not use macrons.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't see any others, so I've got a couple myself. So with the one around the Gambling Act, the last sentence on 11.1 says, with full support from the sector, LGNZ will arrange for a direct discussion with the Minister, inferring that it's sort of happening at LGNZ level. Trying to pull up my note here and it's not coming up. How do we ensure any follow-up there? It's not to say that I don't trust that LGNZ will, but just to, how will we know what those discussions are happening, are ongoing, and what the outcomes of those discussions are, and when?
So the council officer that was working on that remit is in conversations, which she's not in that area anymore, but she's been having conversations with the team that will be looking after that, so that they can remain in contact with LGNZ and ensure that conversation continues.
Thank you. Yep.
I will add, LGNZ provides regular report backs on their work program. So if it gets accepted as a remit, they have to report back to the sector on what progress they make against it. So on a regular basis, somewhat like our quarterly reporting, you would hear updates as there was progress, and on an annual basis, you'd absolutely see it in their feedback, which, for example, at tomorrow's AGM, there's feedback on last year's remits.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. Then,
Local Government New Zealand's governance portfolio holder, Mark Reid, said he's quite willing to come and talk to us on both issues.
Okay, thanks, Kira. If I could leave that with you then. The next one was on 12.1, which was around the review of the Act. it's saying that a remit's not required, and as such, council can work directly with LGNZ to support this work. So it doesn't. My notes here are what are we going to do here in terms of just ensuring that districts lines that once again just staff working directly with LGNZ. Yeah. Okay.
So along the same lines, it can just continue with the council officers working with LGNZ directly.
Sure.
And I mean, I can't speak for the council policy work program, but obviously if it was something that was of interest to raise it up to that level.
Thank you. And the last one was around the tangata whenua considerations. It's been covered a little bit already, but how are those considerations fed into, other than our decision making, like it'd be unusual for them to support it and then us potentially say to vote against a remit, does that then really go to the Mayor when he's talking to it in his role at the table at the time? I'm just saying we've got this feedback from them, but how does it actually get put into action in terms of...
During the debate in local government meeting tomorrow, we can raise those issues if need be.
I don't see any further questions. We've got the recommendations on page 171. As we discussed earlier, there is a couple of approaches to this. We can go through one by one. There's quite a few there, and I don't mind doing that if people are happy to quickly move in second, and we can move through at pace. Or we could take the whole lot as a block, or you could take them with one as an exception. If there is an exception, we'll need to have a little bit of a discussion around that. So, Councillor Holbrook, do you want to talk about whether there is the mood for an exception?
How about I move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
So rather than moving them, could you just talk to the one that you want to exclude? Because I think we need to have a discussion around exclusion rather than a discussion around moving.
Okay, so then I'll move that we don't accept that one. And then we can discuss it.
A normal process could be you could just move that one alone and change the wording to say you don't support and see if you win, or you could move the lot with the changed wording in that one. That would be a little complicated in my opinion, but so normally if we had a sense of there's an either or here, we would have given you both options and you could choose one. I would say that you would move that one now as the first item of business, but reversing the wording.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. The committee does not agree to support Remit 6. That's recommendation number 7.
So if I could just clarify in case anyone hasn't picked up on what's happened, Councillor Holbrook has just moved all the recommendations with one change.
No, I have only moved one, which is number 7, and I've changed the wording to does
Good
not.
for me to clarify.
So that we can just discuss that one.
Thank you, and hence the reason
if I
for clarifying.
Then we just move all of them.
Yeah, sure. Is everyone clear on that? Yeah? All right, so have we got a seconder? Councillor Compton, right of introduction.
So it's hard to get these remits through at the best of times. This one is such a long shot that I don't want to be wasting local government's precious time following it up and investigating it when there's far more pressing and important issues to deal with at the moment. And the reason I don't think it's a goer is that I think central government would need to change their electoral cycle as well. Otherwise you'd end up with elections in the same year from time to time, and that just wouldn't work. So for that reason, I'm moving that we don't accept this particular remit.
Thank you.
We don't support this particular remit.
Any further discussion on that? Councillor Compton?
Yeah, just to echo what Councillor Holbrook said around, I think it sends the wrong message around priorities in the sector. I think, as Councillor Holbrook said, was discussing during questions about the issues around annual and long-term plans, around central government electoral cycles. There's a whole lot to unpack here, and I agree, it's just not a priority for the sector at the moment. So in terms of local government, New Zealand focusing on the really important things we need in the immediate term, I think that's definitely an issue. It's a worthy one to talk about, just not at the moment in the scenario that the country is facing.
Thanks, Quinn. I can't see any other names up on the screen, so I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour of not progressing this one? So aye. Aye. Against? And that is carried. And do we have someone that wants to move the remaining recommendations?
Recommendations as they stand.
Seconded by Councillor Compton. Right of introduction.
Heard of priorities from the community and from the sector, and they're well thought out remits, very well written, with support from the councils that are particularly affected by them. So I'm very happy to support the remaining recommendations.
Any further discussion? No. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? And that is carried. Thank you. And is that all for you, Morag? Yep. Thank you for your generous contribution. Almost done, team. Moving on to page 218, which is the confirmation of minutes.
Are we going to talk about this?
Oh, sorry, I missed that. I'm looking at the time and hastily moving through. Just let me go back. It's doing digital. I am not actually, but that's all right. How did I not see that on the... Oh, that's in the additional one. Do we need Morag back for that? She's just left.
We'll give it a go.
Find it myself on the digital, so 217, page 217, team, and we're just flicking through. Sorry, it's just a little bit slower on the... All right. Thank you. I should have made myself a footnote just to remind me of the... so on page 217, we have the election of the LGNZ President and Vice President.
How do you want to do this, Mr Chair? Do you want us to put a motion on the table?
Look, I think the easiest way is if someone wants to test the appetite of the...
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, should we go for the President first? If someone wants to, Councillor Holborough has signalled already that she's very quickly out of the gate. If you want to put a couple of names, put a name forward for that individual one, and then we can see whether it's got support around the table.
Yeah, I'm happy to nominate Stuart Crosby, Bay of Plenty Regional Council, for President for the 2020-23 term.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Halliday. Right of introduction.
We had a really good session yesterday where all of these candidates came and spoke with us on a Zoom meeting, and I think we had almost all councillors, if not all councillors, in attendance on that. So I'd like to thank the Mayor and support staff Tanika particularly for organising and running that, because I think it was really valuable. And it was not only good to meet the candidate who might end up being president, but all of those candidates and hear about what their priorities are, and certainly really talented and valuable people in the sector, all four of them. The reason I'm nominating Stuart Crosby is I think, particularly in this time, we need consistency and we need institutional knowledge and we need somebody who has an intimate knowledge of the whole sector. And what particularly struck me was that he's already been around so many of the councils as Vice President and knows the intricacies of the issues facing the sector as a whole and individual councils in the sector. I think the other candidate is also an extremely strong candidate, and I think she has a really great future in the sector, and it was also really good to hear from her and her approach. So though I think Mayor Alex Walker is a fantastic candidate and would make a wonderful president on balance, Stuart Crosby brings that breadth of experience, that knowledge, and some consistency that we need in the climate, particularly now.
Thank you, Jenna. I don't see any other names down in terms of debate. Grayson? Debate?
Supports
the election of Stuart Crosby, Bay of Plenty Regional Council, as LGNZ President for the 2020-23 term.
Thank you. And one last cast around the room just to see there's no further discussion on that. Otherwise, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And the second one is the Vice President. Councillor Elliott.
I would like to nominate for the position of Vice President to our second candidate here, Mayor Hamish McDougall from the Whanganui District Council.
Councillor Holbrook, you seconded. Was that?
No, I'm not
Oh,
seconding.
sorry.
I'm just putting my name up to speak.
Sorry. Okay, so just looking for someone to second that. Let's wish the Mayor. Right of introduction.
Thank you. During my time as a councillor, I had the opportunity through LGNZ AGM to really get to know Mayor Hamish McDougall. I think is in a previous councillor role even before Mayor, but he has also he's been a person who takes a real interest in us, and he very much considers Kapiti as in his neighbourhood, and I think that's a really good thing. But we're in his string of provincial towns up this west coast, and I think that it's really important in that he will look to the interests of Kapiti as much as he does to his own district, Whanganui.
Thank you, Jackie. Councillor Holbrook, you're okay now? So any further discussion on that? No, I'm going to put that to the vote. Did we have the wording for that clear again, Grayson? Yeah, great. Excellent. Just checking. All right. So all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? And that's carried.
So through you, Mr Chair, if I may, there is one other resolution that I don't think we covered, and that is to provide a view on whether to agree with the recommendation to reduce the number of terms for President and Vice President from 3 to 2. So that's a rule change. Not that many years back, they increased it from 2 to 3. Now there's been a bit of a, actually, we don't think that was right. We would like to go backwards from 3 to 2. Not that it's my space to speak, the Mayor probably would, but some of the conversation was around the fact that that's quite a long time, given the desire for some changing representation over time in terms of who's leading the sector.
Thank you, team. And look, I should take responsibility for that in the sense that we took those motions as a whole, and I didn't pick up on the fact at the time that we should have really there was a view on that one. So do we need to rescind anything in terms of that we've already moved that, or is it how do we want to formally? Yeah, I'm just saying. Yeah, how do we formally address it in the meeting?
If I may, I would advise that what you moved as a block were the remits, not all the resolutions. So the resolutions relating to remits were moved as a block, which were numbers 37 to 49, or to 50. Actually, we'll make it to 50, which is slightly broader than the remits because it's just noting who will be representing the council. If that's acceptable to the table, I think we can interpret it that way.
Thank you. So to move this.
Keep it simple though. I'm happy to move the recommendation that we support the rule change to reduce the term from 3 terms to 2 as well, and maybe and Gwen's happy to second that.
Thank you. So I'm just clarifying for procedural. Is that moving recommendation 51? Yeah. So that is page number 171.
Yes, Mr Chair. So I suggest the wording be changed to that the committee agree to the rule change proposal. So rather than provide the presiding delegate with a view on the rule, agree to the rule change proposal.
So just to clarify, I previously moved the remits, recommendations 37 through 49. With the, so first of all we moved 43 with the changed wording, and then we moved the remainder up to 49. And so we haven't done 50 or 51.
51 and 52.
So I shouldn't. So we're doing 51 and 52 now.
It's got the numbers up there, isn't it?
Can I move it even though I'm going to be the...
I'm happy to move.
Can I just check before we move on any further? I'm not trying to complicate things, but I know staff are just sorting out some time. Okay. So look, team, we're going to take a 10-minute break. That leaves a little bit of leeway, and staff are just sorting out what they've got up on the screen there so that it procedurally is right. So we'll be back in at 1 o'clock, and we'll just get this sorted and then come back and vote accordingly.